So why do we change the rear exhaust, and what are we taking out and what are we putting back in?
So one of the biggest reasons to change your exhaust is weight, really. So the steel pipe we're taking out, it's quite a heavy, very basic construction one. It does the job fine, but unfortunately it's quite heavy, so we put the Scorpion pipes on. They're about 2 kilos lighter than the standard pipe, which is obviously a great deal of weight saved on a bike that's already quite light itself. Obviously they sound great. And keep the baffle in, obviously.
Yeah, they look great, and they do sound great, and I think it really changes the look of the bike, makes it feel a bit more purposeful.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah, and when I was holding the OEM one that you took out and replacing it, and holding the new kit, you could really tell the difference in weight there. Okay, so what did we do?
First step was taking obviously the OEM pipe off. With the new pipe, we supplied a 12 spline 10mm spanner. It's quite a special spanner, and that's designed for the special nuts on the back of the cylinder head that hold the pipe on. So the first job is obviously to take these nuts off. Be careful not to drop them in the engine. If you've got a magnet or anything like that, it's a useful thing to have around. Once they're removed, you want to take the CO2 sensor off. So that's already in the pipe at the moment. Using a 22mm spanner, you can just crack that off and take it out with your hand. And then after that, the pipe's just being held on by the rear mounting bracket on the pillion footrest. So once everything's else off, take this off and then wiggle the pipe, because the rubber bung, that'll probably be quite tight if it's a new bike, and you just have to sort of ease it off the back of the bike, wiggling it left and right, and then it'll just come out.
Great. And there was something that you made a point of making sure was still in the bike.
Yeah, so there's a small copper shim that goes in the back of the cylinder head, in between the pipe and the cylinder head. This comes out quite often when you remove the original pipe, so you just need to make sure before you go any further that you've definitely got that shim properly seated in the cylinder head. There's a small tag to see the rotation, so you know it's in at the correct angle.
Great. Okay, so we've got the OEM pipe off. Is the new Scorpion pipe ready to go straight back on?
Not quite. It comes in 3 separate parts compared to a one-piece unit. So we pre-assembled 2 of the parts. At this point, if you've got a catalytic converter, you want to insert it into the space provided, like these Scorpion instructions show you. If not, just crack on. So you want to install the 2 parts of the main pipe. You can line these up correctly by using the tags for the springs. Put the springs on before you put it in the bike. Obviously it's a lot easier, you've got more space and more control than when it's on the bike and you're trying to fiddle around in there. Main thing you want to check is just you've got your pipe correctly rotated and positioned, and then just butt it in, slide it in, butt it up, and get one of the nuts on just to hold it in place.
And so putting it back in, I guess it's a case of feeding it in the right angle and then finger tight, or are we tightening stuff up at that point?
Yeah, because the Scorpion pipe's got a bit of a bulge for the cat converter, you might need to lift the swing arm a tiny bit just to do that, but just feed it under. Then you want to get the 2 nuts on, supporting the pipe at the back. Obviously it's still quite heavy to be held on at this time by 2 loose nuts and a bracket, so push the bracket over the stud and get 2 nuts on there, and you want them as tight as you can. Finger tight at the moment, obviously, because the pipe might need to rotate left or right, because it's a 3-piece pipe. It can rotate in a lot of different ways.
Okay. And the silencer then just goes straight on, or?
So you've got a bracket. You're supplied with a bracket from Scorpion, 2 M8 nuts and spacers, and you want to put these on the back of the pipe as per the instructions, but leave them just finger tight. This bracket's slotted so it goes left and right. So once you put the pipe on, you adjust the bracket to the correct position of the pillion footrest mount, and then once that's correctly lined up, you can do those up.
Great. And is that the end of the process?
Not quite. I mean, everything's just about finger tight now. You've got it all, you've checked nothing's fouled, everything's loose, so you want to start tightening from the front back. The 2 nuts on the studding, you want to tighten those evenly left to right, so you know you've got even pressure on the pipe. And then working your way down, you want to put the CO2 sensor in next.
Okay, I noticed you did something a little bit kind of special with the CO2 sensor. I'm guessing it was to stop the cable from getting twisted. So how do you do that?
So I make sure the cable's straight and there's no twist in the cable. I put a little dot of permanent marker on one of the hexes of the CO2 sensor, and then I turn it anti-clockwise 3.5 turns. This is the amount of thread that it has. So I know that once I've screwed it into the pipe, there's not going to be any kinks or twists in the actual wiring itself.
Okay, so the CO2 sensor's in. What happens next?
Now we need to secure the silencer part of the pipe. So making sure there's 2 nuts that we looked at earlier on the bracket are done up, and then inserting the nut and the bracket off the OEM pipe setup back through the original pillion mount. then just getting that all tight, making sure the pipe's secure. Obviously you've already secured it at the front end, so the pipe now should be pretty rigid. And then the last step's just the heat shield. So that comes off your OEM pipe. You've got 2 M6x8 bolts provided from Scorpion, and that goes straight onto your new pipe.
Okay, great. And using spring pullers to tighten those springs makes life a lot easier.
Definitely. I mean, they're about £6. They're like the easiest thing to use for springs instead of using pliers, or I've seen a lot of different techniques, but just a standard spring puller, you don't need anything fancy.
Yeah, I've used needle nose pliers before and it's pretty tricky. Great, so that's the exhaust swapped over. It wasn't particularly complicated. So about half an hour for that exhaust?
Yeah, I'd say about that for the exhaust. You just want to take your time, make sure you're not damaging anything or nothing's fouled or sort of incorrectly positioned, especially with that rear bracket.
Great.